many engagements. This is the second event of Women Development Cell of Sister Nivedita University. We did one last year in terms of gender consciousness, gender sensitization, and since then they were more sensitized, so we didn't do the sensitization. Now it seems we need to repeat the sensitization because it needs to be repeated. As far as Women's Day is concerned, we all know the history, etc. I won't go to that. We took Women Development Cell as this way here, that here whoever has a problem as a woman, then Women Development Cell should intervene. Should not intervene unnecessarily. So we don't intervene. We actually activate the situation. If the woman is lonely and cannot actually say anything to anybody, they can come to the Women Development Cell. We have been asking for space to administration, which we haven't got yet, because we need to have a space where we can sit as Women Development Cell at least twice weekly, so that we can listen to the problems of students, women faculty, women staff, whoever actually. So the last point is interesting. Even though it is Women Development Cell, we really do not want a binary divisions among us as men and women. In fact, we are no longer binary in the world. We are men, women, other, which means transgender. So Women Development Cell actually wants to be on the side of the person who suffers. From that point of view, we have prepared a song to honor our illustrated guest, Dr. Julia Hauser from Germany, and our Performing Arts Department students have prepared this. The song should be known to all of our generation and next generation. It was written by John Lennon before he died, and actually before he died he gave also an interview that his wife Yoko Ono actually the one who read the lyrics most of the time. The name of the song is Imagine. And after Lennon died, or rather murdered, this song became popular by Nana Mouskouri, the Greek musician. And it became so popular that more or less we often forget that it was Lennon actually who told us. So we're remembering today Lennon, Yoko, and Nana Mouskouri, and also our position as Women Development Cell. Thank you. Yeah, but that wasn't that popular. I'm taking up the one which majority liked, that way.
Imagine there's no heaven. It's easy if you try. No hell below us, above us only sky. Imagine all the for today. Imagine there's no countries. It's really hard to do. Nothing to kill or die for, and no religion to. Imagine all the people living in peace. You may say I'm a dreamer. danger if you can. No from greed or hunger, a brotherhood of man. Imagine all the people sharing all the world. You will say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not believing. I hope someday you'll join us, and the world will live as one. Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed not only the song, but the words, the spirits of the song, which actually is decaying and under attack by the development of rightist regime everywhere. When Lenin wrote, actually, that time it was not that situation, but still he felt the world was at danger, both Yoko and Lenin. And this song in our university days actually were one of the moving songs and one of the thematic songs, no doubt about it. I hope all of you actually appreciated it, because this is my choice. I don't think I sort of wanted to impose my choice, but I hope someday you join us, sort of thing. I'm going directly to Dr. Hauser's introduction, because Vice Chancellor is in a meeting, so he can come whenever he wants to. Dr. Julia Hauser is a senior lecturer in modern history at the University of Kassel, Germany. Her research interests include the entanglement of Germany and Europe with West and South Asia in the 19th and 20th century. She is particularly interested in the history of gender, the body, religion, and science. Her publications include German religious women in late Ottoman Beirut, Competing Missions, which was published from Brill, Leiden, 2015, and A Test for Purity, an Entangled History of Vegetarianism, published from New York Columbia University Press, 2024. She is also an alumna of the Arab-German Young Academy of Sciences and Humanities. She just told me that she is also learning Arabic for her research. Hauser was a fellow at the Orient Institute, Beirut, Rice University, Houston, Texas, the Center for Studies in Social Sciences, Kolkata, and ICAMS, Delhi. Among her publications, the German religious women in late Ottoman Beirut, I already actually said that, and another publication which is, she's here with the book, The Moral Contagion, which is actually shared with Sharnath Banerjee, who looked after the, I guess the picture parts or something. Just hold the book a little bit. It's from HarperCollins, and it has been hugely, actually in Google, hugely it has been rated that we all should read it. It's about pandemics and earlier pandemics also. Thank you. Julia, it's all yours.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bada. Thank you for the kind introduction. I'm very happy to be here and get to know this wonderful university. Yeah, I look forward to the discussion with you. What I'm presenting today is a piece of research that I am still working on, so it's not yet finished. So any hints you might have, I would really be glad to take up. So as Dr. Bada said, as Dr. Bula said, I'm interested in entanglements between Europe and West Asia and India during the 19th and 20th century, and this is, it is from this interest that I approach the topic. Right, I can actually.
That would be much easier.
Is this one? Is it working? It doesn't seem to be working.
It was working.
Maybe it's not plugged in.
No, not like that.
Yeah, it's okay.
That way it is better. Anyway,
I mean, like this should actually be
Anyway.
working, but
was it plugged in this? Okay.
I mean, no worries if it doesn't work.
No, it doesn't work. I don't think it works.
Now it's off anyway.
It's working.
Yeah. Okay. Wonderful.
Delayed technology transfer. Okay.
Right. Yeah. I think I just need to be close to the microphone. Oh, right. No.
The microphone is adjustable, Dr. Hauser, so if you want to.
Is this?
Yeah.
Is it better now?
Yeah.
I mean, am I audible? Okay. All right. Surrounded by a group of children, 2 students of the International Center of Education at Sri Aurobindo Ashram in Pondicherry wrestle with each other in a wrestling pit in the summer of 1959. The smell of the wrestler's sweat is counteracted by other, more pleasant odors as the soil of the wrestling pit is mixed with fragrant herbs and essences, turmeric, neem, and sandal powder. The wrestlers do not let themselves carry away by these fragrances. They are focused on the fight. The one currently dominating the scene is pressing their opponent towards the ground, stretching their left arm, and wrapping their right arm around their waist. It's, yeah. I can just take the other one.
Close to the mouth.
Yeah, be close to it.
All right.
Now it's better.
Now it's
Yeah. Wrestling, as Joseph Alter has shown, had been central to Hindu nationalists' attempt at strengthening a Hindu masculinity so belittled in British colonial discourse. In this, it equaled the resurgence of sumo wrestling in Meiji Japan, equally intended to bolster masculinity in Japan's struggle against Western imperialism. Remarkably, however, the image from Sri Aurobindo Ashram, titled Wrestling La Lutte Indienne, shows 2 young women in combat. I'll just show the picture to you. What's happening here? Yeah. So this is the picture I'm talking about. So it shows 2 young women in combat. As I argue in this talk, wrestling was just one discipline among many taught at the ashram, all of which were taught to boys and girls alike. Why then were sports so central to an educational institution founded by a self-styled ascetic withdrawn from the world and any kind of physical activity? And what was the role of gender in this context? Sri Aurobindo Ashram had come into being after Aurobindo Ghosh's escape to Pondicherry, then a French colony, following his detention for his connection to an attempt to the life of a British official in Muzaffarpur. According to his biographers, especially Peter Hayes, Aurobindo distanced himself from politics in Pondicherry, instead turning to education and meditation above all. A group of former collaborators and disciples assembled around him. First, they lived together informally. In 1914, Aurobindo met Mira Richard near Alfassa, a French citizen who had been born to a wealthy Turkish-Egyptian Jewish couple in France. Alfassa, later the mother, a trained artist who had turned to occultism and became interested in India around 1905, had traveled to Pondicherry in 1914 as the wife of French politician Paul Richard. Like her husband, she was in sympathy with the Indian independence movement, yet had also come to India in her own spiritual quest. Soon after their meeting, Alfassa became Aurobindo's disciple. Together with her guru and her then husband, she co-edited the journal Arya, a philosophical review, published between 1914 and 1920, which featured articles by Sri Aurobindo. Is it still problematic?
It is still a
Oh,
little
I'm so
bit
sorry.
problematic. Maybe you have to. You're very soft-spoken.
Yeah. Okay. I'll be loud then.
You have to like me.
Like many other Hindu nationalists, Aurobindo sought to revive the idea of Aryanism, arguing that humankind could only spiritually evolve if it returned to moral, spiritual, and bodily purity. After spending much of the First World War with her husband in Japan, Alfassa returned to Pondicherry, separating from her husband and living permanently in the community from 1920 until her death in 1973. so almost more than half a century. In 1926, and against the resistance of several members of the ashram, Aurobindo elevated Alfessa, never enthusiastic about biological motherhood, although she did give birth to one son, to the spiritual mother of the ashram, as well as of the future humankind he hoped to work for spiritually, thus acknowledging her spiritual parity and entrusting her with the organization of daily life inside the ashram. Aurobindo, by contrast, worked on his spiritual enlightenment until his death, or Mahasamadhi, as the ashram members refer to it, in 1950. While this sounds like a rigid division of tasks, Aurobindo continually stressed that he and Alfassa were working on the same aspects and that they depended on each other to do so. Not physically, since Aurobindo rejected physical closeness, an alleged obstacle to spiritual progress, as did Alfassa, but in spirit. In the 1920s and 30s, the ashram grew slowly. From the Second World War onwards, it attracted a far greater number of men and women, now encompassing not only sadhaks, that is ashram members, but also their children. Most sadhaks came from different parts of India, with Bengali speakers a clear majority. After 1945, the community also attracted a few European members, particularly French, American, and German academics, some of them rising to influential positions inside the organization and receiving Indian names. In 1943, the year of the Bengal famine, the mother opened a school for the ashram children. Soon she would stress the importance of physical education for the children's mental and physical development. Although Alfassa retired into meditation in 1958, she continued to be the central authority of the ashram and school, named the Sri Aurobindo International Center of Education in 1959, until her death. The school's name already hints at its purpose. Internationalism was central to it, and so was to some degree nationalism. As Aurobindo had argued in his essay on the ideal of human unity, first published in Arya from 1915 to 1918 and revised on the eve of the Second World War, humankind could only evolve further if greater unity between nations and cultures was achieved. While national governments ought to be abolished in the long run, a little bit like Imagine in this regard, in favor of an overarching world government, national cultures would continue to exist but needed to be brought into dialogue. At the ashram school, students would be exposed to all cultures of the world, not just because it was open to anyone regardless of nation or religion, but, I quote, because an attempt is made to represent here the cultures of the different regions of the world in such a way as to be accessible to all, not merely intellectually, in ideas, theories, principles, and languages, but also vitally in habits and customs, in art under all form, and physically through dress, games, sports, industries, food, and even reconstruction of natural scenery. In this regard, Aurobindo's and Alfassa's enterprise resembled another renowned institution in India, Rabindranath Tagore's Vishwa Bharati University at Shantiniketan, however, it differed from the former by its strong emphasis on physical education. Neither teaching nor the composition of its student body, at least during Alfassa's lifetime, lived up to the internationalist ideal entirely. While ancient Egypt, Asia, Europe, and the United States were represented in the curriculum, significant parts of the world, that is Africa, apart from Egypt, Arab, Islamic cultures, and South America, did not play a role. Also, most students were Indian and Hindu. Aurobindo's concept of Aryanism might not have been attractive to non-Hindu, particularly Muslim and Dalit students. Nonetheless, the school combined nationalism and internationalism in a way reminiscent of India's politics of non-alignment, entertaining contacts both to Western countries like France and the United States, but also to Russia. Aurobindo's and Alfassa's life have been subject of in-house publications mainly. So, to name just a few, actually, I can talk about that later. Researchers, including younger scholars like David Brehm and Mary Horatius, likewise have mainly focused on the tangible spiritual aspects in the ashram. It is only recently that the political dimensions of Alfassa's work have been examined. Most scholars, including Kumari Jayawardena, Leela Gandhi, Ravi Bajpai, and Swati Parashar, view her as a Western ally of the anti-colonial movement in India without taking into account her hybrid identity or her sympathies towards French colonialism. Only Jessica Namakal's recent study stresses the ashram's entanglement with French colonial structures and its sense of superiority and civilizing mission towards its Tamil environment. All in all, publications on the Pondicherry ashram are highly focused on the personalities and spiritual agendas of its founders. By contrast, the school and its agenda of physical education, although very much connected to the ashram's spiritual aims as we shall see, have hardly been examined to date. This is astonishing, since the connection of sports, nationalism and colonialism has received much attention both with regards to India and other parts of the world during the last decades. More to the point, scholars like Peter Hayes have also pointed to Sri Aurobindo's role in this context. However, since the Ashram school was founded after his withdrawal from politics, it has not been connected to Sri Aurobindo's or the mother's political visions. In this talk, I hope to make an initial and necessarily incomplete contribution to these aspects, while also pointing towards another neglected phenomenon. Most studies in sport and anti-colonialism in India, including the research of Indra Chaudhary, Joseph Alter, Abhijit Gupta, and Carrie Watt, have highlighted the prominent role of notions of masculinity. In this talk, by contrast, I aim at showing that female protagonists likewise played a role in that debate, and that at least on a discursive level, the concepts advocated went well beyond a binary model of gender. The article relies on a number of published sources. The Bulletin of Sri Aurobindo International Center of Education, first published in 1949 as a bilingual journal in English and French. Various publications by Sri Aurobindo and the mother, as well as publications and memoirs by ashram members, such as Nolini Kanta Gupta or Pranab Kumar Bhattacharya, the director of physical education at the ashram school. While these sources allow a detailed insight into the normative aspects of physical education at the ashram school, they need to be read against the grain for any conclusions as to breaks and ruptures in the school's ambitious agenda and its ambivalences. After surveying the disciplines in physical education at the ashram school, I argue that sports was central to its concept of education and that the curriculum represented an agenda of Olympic breadth. I then examined Sri Aurobindo's and the mother's view on sports, arguing that the ashram school curriculum reflected their personal as well as political positions on sports. I go on to show that physical education at the ashram was seen as crucial to the development of new humankind, a humankind that would shrug off the limitations imposed by sexual differences. In practice, however, gender and sexual differences continue to be central to sports at the ashram. So, sports was a prominent part of the curriculum in this institution, and from the 1950s onwards, the curriculum encompassed a dazzling array of sports of Western and Asian origin alike. Each term had a specific focus, with athletics, games, gymnastics, and competitive sports taught in different parts of the year. Athletics included swimming, throwing of the discus and mallet, high and long jump, and running. In terms of games, students engaged in tug-of-war, cricket, basketball, volleyball, softball, hockey, kabaddi, and Alfasa's favorite game, tennis. From the 1970s onwards, table tennis was also taught at the ashram. From the beginning, gymnastics included Indian exercises on the Malkham pole and cane, that was a quotation, as well as Hatha Yoga asanas. A speciality of the ashram was gymnastic marching, which we can see in this picture, a type of mass drill accompanied by drums intended to bring together, quote, exercises from different parts of the world. The principal occasion for this type of marching was the annual darshan of the ashram founders and later of Mera Alfasa alone. On this day, very much opposed to Aurobindo's rejection of formal rituals that Peter Hayes ascribes to him, students would march past their balconies in neatly organized formations. Images of these events strike the researcher as reminiscent of the mass gymnastic displays in 1920s Russia, documented by Alexander Rodchenko, of Nazi sports events such as the Berlin Olympic Games of 1936, or indeed of the marches of the RSS, at least as far as these formations are concerned. In later years, the ceremony was merely dubbed the March Past. Students would also engage in acrobatics, as we can see in the next picture, and the ensuing ones. Photos of displays on festive days showed them forming figures or symbols, such as the symbol of Sri Aurobindo and the mother, sometimes at night with burning torches. Gymnastics included bodybuilding, with the weightlifting section of the gymnasium inaugurated in 1952. The ashram was repeatedly visited by bodybuilding champions such as Parimal Roy, who had won the title of Mr. Asia, or Kamai Pandari, who had won the title of Parashri, Mr. India. And we can see some of these pictures here. The bulletin of Sri Aurobindo International Center of Education published photos of these muscular, well-oiled athletes, some of them posing at the seashore, others grouped in tableaux vivants reminiscent of the works of Roman and Greek antiquity and classical works of European art, such as Michelangelo's Pietà. Competitive sports finally encompassed judo, wrestling, boxing, fencing, lati, and later jiu-jitsu. Mira Alfassa, or the mother, Sri Aurobindo's spiritual companion, who was in sole charge of the ashram since 1926, is generally characterized as the main architect of the ashram curriculum, which included physical education. Alfassa spent many hours in the sports ground, initially dressed in white and often seated in an armchair placed in front of the flag of India, adorned with the symbol, the 12-petaled lotus, distantly reminiscent of the chalka. And the lotus, again, we have here. Thank you.
I know, I'm sorry about this microphone.
It's okay. Yeah. Nonetheless, she was not solely responsible for the ashram's physical education scheme. Other members of the ashram supported her in designing the curriculum. The first members of the sports team came from the anti-colonial sports scene of Aurobindo's city of origin, Kolkata. Chief among them was Pranab Kumar Bhattacharya from Calcutta, a former member of the Kolkata Boxing Club, who was also familiar with weight training, wrestling, hatha yoga, folk dances, and drills. From 1945 onwards, Bhattacharya, a tall, muscular man dressed in a khaki uniform with shorts, was employed as Alfassa's personal attendant and the director of the physical education department. Soon, Biren Chanda, his former coach at the Kolkata Boxing Club and known as the Knockout King, joined him in coordinating the lessons. In 1946, regular medical checkups for students were introduced. Boys and girls were weighed, measured, and examined, with results documented comparatively. Sports facilities soon included a physiotherapy department. From 1949 onwards, the ashram published a bulletin on physical education featuring articles by the ashram founders, and other contributions on physical education, spirituality, and didactics, as well as annual reports. Finally, further teachers and external coaches, including champions from Europe, the United States, and Russia, were invited or hired. Particularly gifted students, known as group captains, supported the teachers. Classes started with 14 boys in 1945, and they were soon extended to more boys and girls, with male and female students training separately in the beginning. Initially, boys and girls were dressed quite differently, boys wearing tank tops and shorts, while girls were dressed in saris or salwar kameez. In 1949, however, girls received their own uniform consisting of white shorts and tank tops in the same color. Both the co-educational training as well as the girls' shorts were a source of controversy within and outside the ashram in the first years, but both prevailed. Before the inauguration of Aurobindo, the ashram's sports facilities were the main reason for its expansion and its ensuing colonization of its environment. In 1948, the ashram acquired land described as uncultivated and badly maintained for the tennis ground from the Pondicherry government, with which it continued to entertain close relations until the end of French rule. In 1951, a new sports ground outside the former premises was inaugurated. The sports ground was adorned with a relief showing a spiritual map of India. It was in front of this relief where Alfassa would be seated when watching lessons, contests, and other events in the sports ground. In 1952, the sports facility saw a further expansion when a boxing ring, wrestling pit, football ground, weightlifting area, and gymnasium, the latter inaugurated on the birthday of the increasingly infirm female head of the ashram, were added. In the late 1950s, a swimming pool, a judo building, and finally a further annex were opened. Already by the 1950s, the sports ground had room for more than 1,500 spectators. When important guests, such as the director of the UNESCO Division of Cultural Cooperation, Prime Minister Nehru and his daughter Indira, or MS Golwalkar, the leader of the RSS, visited the ashram, it was in the sports ground that they were received. As is evident from this brief overview,
Leader of the RSS also visited.
Yes.
Who was that? Then who was the leader of the RSS?
Golwalkar.
Okay.
As is
Along with Nehru.
not at the same time, they
Not at the
visited
same time.
separately. Yeah. As is evident from this brief overview, the ashram trained its students as well as the adults living there in a wide variety of sportive disciplines. Regularly, champions and coaches from India, Western Europe, Russia, and the United States visited the ashram to give courses to its members. Next to bodybuilding champions Parimal Roy and Kamal Bhandari, gymnasts from the Soviet Union, tennis stars from Denmark, and finally various alumni and alumni of the College of Physical Education in Cologne, Germany, which, by the way, is my hometown, were among those visitors. One alumnus of the Cologne institutions, Werner Haubrich, even stayed for a prolonged period, becoming a member of the teaching body and being named Sumitra by Professor. Some of these coaches also introduced innovations in the curriculum. From 1963 onwards, the students were subject to physical fitness tests after the model of the Navy's standard physical tests of the USA. While students were normally grouped and trained according to age and gender, those who did not pass the tests were included in these groups, but instead lumped together in a unit referred to as the non-group, receiving special training as a consequence. Students were also regularly weighed, measured, and evaluated. They stood in marked contrast to the ideal of the school not to give certificates or break records. As one quarterly report stressed somewhat ambivalently, I quote, "We are not out to break records, but nevertheless it is gratifying to compare our performances with that of athletes in other parts of the world, and to know that very soon, with the children, we will be able to break, unofficially of course, national and other records." Given these high-flying aims, the broad variety of sports, with at least 4 major events per year representing the panoply of sportive disciplines taught at the school, and its internationalist outlook, physical education at the ashram may be said to have been influenced by the modern concepts of the Olympics in its approach. It brought together and regularly displayed to the public a wide array of sportive disciplines that had originated in different parts of the world. Students were trained by an international teaching body. Due to the anti-British sympathies of its founders, it never included British members of staff. By contrast, the ashram did have some French members, such as Philippe Barbier de Saint-Hilaire, an engineer and former military official. The curriculum aimed at promoting the unity and peace of humankind, but also competition. Yet, there was one major difference to the Olympics and similar concepts in the 20th century. Participants were almost exclusively citizens of newly independent India. While the Olympic Games had already served as an inspiration to the Asian Games, a festival first promoted by the YMCA, yet turned into an anti-colonial event during the first half of the 20th century, the Pondicherry ashram promoted only one nation as the representative and forerunner of all nations, India. At first glance, it may seem unusual for an ashram to place such emphasis on sports, including Western discipline, all the more so since Sri Aurobindo, according to his biographer Peter Hayes, was never a passionate sportsman himself. Even though he praised the sports facilities at Cambridge University in retrospect, stressing that they turned any students, I quote, in 3 years from a boy into a man, unquote, he showed little interest in games during his time at university. Eventually, failing the writing test, he did not pass the entry exam into the Indian civil service. On the other hand, Aurobindo was hardly someone who rejected physical exercise. Indeed, he was convinced that India had to become strong to overcome British colonial rule, a conviction that was not unique to Aurobindo, but shared by virtually all protagonists in the nationalist movement. The British, after all, had claimed that they were entitled to rule the subcontinent because of Hindu men's alleged physical weakness. Government colleges, the Boy Scouts, and the YMCA aimed at training the supposedly effective male Indian body. As John Rosselli and Indira Chaudhary have shown, members of the Hindu elite adopted the stereotype of male Hindu fragility. Strengthening the male Hindu body, therefore, was central to emerging nationalist movement since the second half of the 19th century and would continue to be so in the 20th century. And this, as everyone probably knows, this included reflections on diet, but it also included reflections on exercise. And so the Anushulan Shamiti, the organization that Aurobindo founded, was very active in that regard. And so were other Hindu nationalist bodies at the time. Yeah, I guess I can skip this passage because this is going to be familiar to everyone in the room. Aurobindo's writing did not permit any conclusions as to whether or not he joined this kind of training. More likely he took a different route, that of disciplining mind, body and emotions by means of yoga, which he defined as, quote, the realization of one's capacity of harmony, communion or union with God, unquote. However, Aurobindo had little sympathy for Hatha yoga, considered inferior to other forms of yoga centering on the spiritual dimension. Characterizing it as a practice eminently suitable for men, he argued that it could help men, quote, outdo the feats of Hercules, unquote, rendering them more masculine by, quote, drawing the whole virile force into the brain. Yet while it helped practitioners to obtain an extraordinary power, in his view, and knowledge transcending the ordinary human bonds, again this is his quote, it could also generate in them colossal egotism. Hatha yoga, as a consequence, needed to be combined with other forms of yoga focused on the heart and mind, as Aurobindo also argued in his later work, Synthesis of Yoga. Yet strikingly, while his notion of yoga was not centered around the body, he claimed that practicing yoga had induced in him certain physical changes. Already when he started taking up yoga in 1905, his health improved, his skin became smoother and fairer, and his mental and physical energy increased. Aurobindo described these processes as changes that he had been able to effectuate by his sheer spiritual force. After his time in prison, he continued working on what he described as his physical perfection, eventually being able to take on any position for any length of time and feeling physical bliss and ecstasy without touch. His associates remarked that his skin had become radiant, indeed golden. In his later writings on yoga, however, Aurobindo stressed the necessity of overcoming the body in order to achieve samadhi, arguing that one needed to detach oneself from the body and, while not neglecting it, become indifferent towards its needs. Bodily inaction could be helpful on the way, yet should not give rise to tamas, inertia, the lowest of the three gunas, and hence opposed to the aim of enlightenment. Physical needs, sexuality and emotions needed to be regarded with indifference. Eventually, the purified heart, that's his quote, would experience, again his quote, a universal love. In contrast, to Sri Aurobindo, the mother was a dedicated sportswoman. A feeble child frequently succumbing to disease, her first tennis lesson at the age of 8 in 1886 introduced her to what would become a lifelong passion. And I have an image of her as an old woman playing tennis.
Is there any image of any woman from outside Bengal went there?
I don't think so, no.
So it was limited to Bengali women who went there?
It was not limited, but they formed the core of the student body, and most students came from Bengal. And I can't identify on the photos who is who, because they don't tell the names unless it's a prominent figure. Like many other girls and women at the time, young Midha was carried away by the sense of freedom tennis gave to her. Of course, now we see her as an old person, but we also have photos of her as a young woman playing tennis. Tennis allowed for less restrictive dress and encouraged running, jumping, and reacting forcefully and quickly, capacities very much opposed to the quiet demeanor expected of middle-class girls in the late 19th century. At the ashram, she continued her practice, famously captured by Henri Cartier-Bresson, that's the left-hand picture, in a tennis court. Photos rarely show her in long dresses. Alfassa seems to have preferred wearing white trousers and kurtas, practical items of dress, allowing a quick match in the court each afternoon. Should I just go?
You can continue.
Okay.
Continue, Kodi?
Yeah, please.
Rather than covering her hair and chest with a dupatta, as conservative local notions of decency would have required, she generally wore a white cap. She only stopped playing tennis at the age of 80 in 1958. Much more so than Sri Aurobindo, the mother rejected the idea that the body needed to be given up in favor of the spirit. Indeed, she believed that sport was crucial to the development of a new humankind as envisaged by Sri Aurobindo. According to him, man was a transitional being likely to evolve first into overman, then into superman. And at the time, of course, this terminology included women. While Alfassa accepted his view, she accorded a far greater role to the body in this process. In her view, the individual needed to achieve perfection to be fit to encounter the divine. Only then could the human race achieve perfection. Perfection, also Alfassa argued, ought to be attained by various means. Next to psychic discipline and mental development, physical education was inevitable, the aim being to push the body to its limits and beyond. In order to achieve all-round physical perfection, students need to be trained in all sportive disciplines, even if not everyone could be a champion. Even though India was already coming into being as an independent nation by the time the ashram started its scheme, exercise was evidently also connected to nation building. This, at any rate, can be inferred from the fact that the bulletin of Sri Aurobindo International Center of Education discussed the development of gymnastics with regard to nationalism, stressing the important role of educators such as Friedrich Ludwig Jahn in Germany or Per Henrik Ling in Sweden, both of whom had argued that their respective nations could only become strong if their male inhabitants did as well. There was no talk of women at the time because that was the early 19th century. However, it was not only Europe that was identified as model in this regard. Other articles discuss the development of physical education in ancient Mesopotamia, ancient Egypt, or indeed in ancient India. The latter article characterized the development of physical education as a history of decline, attesting a particularly negative role to the emergence of Buddhism, as well as the Mughal and British invasions. At present, the article implied India could only regain physical greatness if it embraced both its history and support from the West. It was not only the idea of a unity of humankind, but also this agenda of nation building that accounted for the panoply of sports taught at the ashram. The body of the individual took center stage in this process of rebuilding humanity and the national body politic. In Hauser's view, the aim of physical education was to build in oneself, quote, total harmony, unquote, so that eventually perfect beauty could express itself through the body. To reach this goal, students had to be taught to be in command of their bodies, down to, quote, each of the body cells, unquote. Rather than an outward sign of a brilliant mind, illness was a symptom of a body out of balance, indeed of weakness. So that's, in fact, eugenicist thought. It could only be cured through a heightened body consciousness. Small wonder, then, that none of the photos of physical education at the ashram showed photos of disabled or overweight children, adolescents, or adults. It was not just illness that Hauser perceived as a form of divergence. To her, even sexual difference was an aberration of nature that would eventually disappear. Even before it did, boys and girls needed to receive the same kind of physical education. Drawing attention to the historical figures like the Rani of Jhansi or Jeanne d'Arc, as well as recent scientific studies, an article in the bulletin argued that women could attain what was considered the gold standard at the time, I quote, male standards of fitness, unquote, indeed even become stronger than, quote, 99% of all men if they took up regular training. Eventually, this would help sexual differences disappear. That was the idea. As long as they continued to exist, men and women would be slaves to desire and hence to each other. But in the course of spiritual evolution, sexual impulses as well as sexual organs, rather bizarre, would finally vanish. The mother's talk on spiritual revolution, therefore, was even more radical than the positions of the Theosophical Society, one of the first groups to coin this concept. Whereas the Theosophists merely claimed that humans had to suppress the alleged animal instincts, that was the expression of the time, they never bothered about the body parts involved in this process. Hauser, by contrast, wished to eliminate both. From this point onwards, procreation would neither be possible nor necessary. India, or so both the mother and Sri Aurobindo implied, might well have a special role to play in the emergence of this new, unsexed, their quotation, humankind, which would finally culminate in the descent of a superior instance referred to by Sri Aurobindo as supermind on earth. In practice, however, physical education at the ashram, and by this I would like to conclude, although producing impressive results, lagged behind this utopian agenda. First, a significant part of the Sathaks were as irritated by the central role of sports in what was to be a contemplative community, and by the fact that this agenda had been initiated by its foreign female head, whom some did not accept in her role as mother and Sri Aurobindo's divine power. Numerous letters addressed to Sri Aurobindo between 1946 and 1950 testify to the sense of irritation, indeed of a certain resistance. In his reply, Aurobindo oscillated between supporting Hauser and distancing himself from her ambitious agenda, stating that Supermind would hardly, quote, descend into the playground, unquote, as he himself would be the last to meet the physical requirements for an encounter of this sort. Undoubtedly, however, the ashram's agenda of physical education was not merely the mother's brainchild. The same androgynous concept of future humankind may also be found in Sri Aurobindo's works. Moreover, Aurobindo himself had stressed the role of physical education in the anti-colonial and nationalist struggle in his earlier years, when the Onuslan Shomiti had trained its members in both local and Western sports disciplines. Aurobindo and Alfasa's notion of future humankind notwithstanding, gender differences continue to be central to physical education at the ashram. Even though girls were allowed to wear shorts and tank tops from 1949 onwards, and sports did in no way aim to preparing them for a future life of motherhood, as would have been typical of Indian physical education at the time, they continue to be easily recognizable by the caps they were obliged to wear to protect their hair. Only the group captains, who were praised as true candidates for supermanhood, quotation, in the license handed out to them, wore gender-neutral uniform. It was not just male uniforms that served as models to female ashram members. The male body likewise constituted the ideal when measuring students' strength and endurance. Furthermore, it was only the male body that was idealized, such as in the portraits of Indian bodybuilders, which we just saw. And at least during the period under review, girls did not participate in international exchanges. There are also very few photographs showing female ashram members weightlifting. If they did practice it, their bodies markedly diverged from the ideal of the slim, fit body preached at the institution. In the light of the curriculum of the Onuslan Shomiti as well in that of the ashram, Joseph Order's distinction between the allegedly non-aggressive tradition of wrestling and practices such as lathi fights and drill, embraced by Hindu nationalist organization, appears somewhat questionable. Rather, the organization founded by Aurobindo show that wrestling could be very much part of an aggressive nationalist agenda, and that this agenda in turn might go well hand in hand with embracing internationalism. Moreover, even though the ashram took a clear stand against Nazism during the Second World War, its sports event echoed the role of sports in the totalitarian regimes of the 20th century. Indeed, these were more than echoes, as the ashram did not only entertain exchanges with the athletes from Soviet Russia, but also with an institution exhibiting clear continuities to the Nazi regime. And that's the College of Physical Education in Cologne, whose director, Karl Diem, still in office during the 1950s, had been one of the central sports functionaries in Nazi Germany, organizing such major events as the Berlin Olympics of 1936. Students likewise complained about the military character of sports at the ashram, at least in retrospect. After Pranab Kumar Bhattacharya's death in 2010, some alumni compared the former director of physical education to the ashram, at the ashram to Stalin or Hitler, because of his rigidity, it seems. While Aurobindo and Alfasa hope to contribute to India's liberation and independence, as well to this, as to the spiritual liberation of the Sataks, their physical liberation was clearly caught in ambivalence. Thank you.
Dr. Hauser actually given us a trajectory of the whole Auroville, and the floor is open for questioning, clarification, comments. But whoever asks a question, please be brief so that others can also ask. On the microphone, there is a problem that is not working. So, microphone ta. Circulate the microphone.
Maybe I should speak a bit louder, but I can certainly hear everyone else.
You can hear everybody else. Before that, can we do the ritual honor part? That since Vice Chancellor is here, that Vice Chancellor gives our guests the honor we generally give from SNU. whoever will ask the question, please raise your hand. Professor Thakur. Then the microphone will go. Okay, maximum.
Before Aurobindo moved to Pondicherry, he was under the Dawn Society. There was a school of engineering set up in Kolkata, which later on became Jadavpur University. And Aurobindo happened to be the first principal of that school for a pretty long time. How much difference in his ideas expressed as a principal of the engineering college was taken over to the educational understanding in Aurobindo? Do you have any understanding of that? Because Dawn Society itself was one of the major focus for the National Council of Education's development of ideas about education, which included Tagore, Babu Rajendra Prasad, and a lot of other dignitaries who, under the British colonial rule, kind of epitomized the core of the intellectual understanding in Kolkata. And Aurobindo was part of that and then moved over to Aurobindo. So, from your description, what I could follow, I was trying to understand, was there anything that he did not continue to take over to the Aurobindo education? That's the question.
You take questions or one by one?
Whatever is better in terms of time.
In terms of time,
One by one is
one by one.
Okay.
One by one.
So actually, I would need to do a comparison of this. I suppose that his thoughts would have been prominent at both universities, given what I know from his talk. But then one thing was quite important at Pondicherry and later on Aurobindo, and that was education in the arts. I guess that maybe wasn't so prominent in the earlier institution, although I would really need to compare both. I guess this emphasis on the arts was really due to Mira and Fassa's influence, because that was her personal interest.
No, initially it was the School of Technology, National School of Technology, which later on became Jadavpur University 50 years later, 1956.
Yeah.
And its first vice chancellor actually got his engineering degree from this school, but could not join any British university for his higher education, so had to go to Germany to get his PhD degree. Dr. Tribuna said. So that was a kind of situation available in this school of technical institution, set up in Jadavpur by the Dawn Society and or the National Council of Education, as it was called at that time.
Well, technical education played hardly a role in Pondicherry. So it was more physical education, the arts, languages, literature. There was little technical education as far as I'm concerned.
Technical education always has other aspects also built in. So, you know, I mean, it's not the engineering disciplines per se, but the other way you develop. So that should have had some bearing, and I'm not very sure from your discourse how much of that was taken.
Yeah, I'll look into this and actually let you know. It's interesting.
She hasn't done research isn't
So that's why the question was.
But this is an interesting
Yeah,
aspect. to
definitely. Yeah.
Molika.
Oh.
Molika.
It's working? Yeah. Guten Nachmittag, Dr. Hauser. Thank you for a very fascinating discussion. I have a couple of observations perhaps you could add to it from your perspective. One is, you've spoken about physical culture and Mira Alfasa at great length. But we've also got to factor in her ethnicity, her multicultural ethnicity. She's got Egyptian, Jewish, Algerian roots, right? Especially she grew up in Algeria for a fairly long amount of time. Her father was an Egyptian Jew. Her mother was based in Turkey.
Yep.
So what about the Krav Maga martial art? Does it ever factor into the physical culture that develops in Auroville? Because the Krav Maga is quite a combative martial art, which is now taking on popular imagination as we know it, especially from the Israeli army that we get to read about so often in the Gaza conflict. The other thing, I'm very interested in the symbolism that you could touch upon a little more. You showed the formation of certain gymnastic circles or the collective circle in the gymnasium or say the sporting ground, and it's very reminiscent of the mandala, which is a very recurrent leitmotif in the tantric tradition. And in both the Life Divine and Savitri, Aurobindo is very, very clear about his tantric sensibilities. So do we see a repetition of that in the formations in the physical culture that is being perpetuated in the Auroville by Mira Alfasa? Perhaps not so consciously, but more subconsciously or subliminally. And my third observation is about this binary that we are trying to construct about physical culture. You know, the masculine idea versus the feminine idea, the Virangana, as Catherine Hansen has written so extensively in her work. But over here, whatever I saw, there was a more pronounced masculinized idea of gendered physical culture, right? How would you draw on the motive of the Virangana or the female warrior? Because I would like to assume that Mira Alfasa, being the female spiritual consort of Sri Aurobindo, would have had some element of her own agency when she's looking at physical culture from the perspective of a woman.
Thank you for these rich questions. First of all, yes, certainly it is important to factor in her ethnicity, although it has to be said that she grew up in France. She spent some time in Algeria, but already as an adult woman, and her parents had also been in France for quite some time. And as far as I know, so she had no ties to Israel. She was Jewish, but she had no ties to Israel. And Krav Maga, therefore, I'm not sure she was familiar with, which anyway was a 20th century phenomenon. In fact, she does not very often stress her Jewish identity. I mean, I can't think of a single passage. Of course, she was Jewish, but her parents were rather secular, as far as I know. Other symbols being present in the performances, well, the symbols being present there were really mainly the two symbols central to the institution, the mother symbol and Sri Aurobindo's symbol. And I, from my limited perspective, do not find much reflection of tantric concepts in the physical education ideal. It may be that someone else with a different perspective would see this easily. I did not, it was not very evident to me. And yes, we can certainly say that the idea of the fit body was quite a masculine idea for the most part in the institution. Nonetheless, she had a favorite female student, which may have been her favorite student at all. And we encounter this favorite student when we go to a collection of personal items of Mira Alfasa that can be seen at the Sri Aurobindo Ashram in Delhi. So here we actually see the tennis racket that was most likely in the photograph. And all these items in the collection were given to her favorite female student, Tara. We also see pictures of her and that favorite student in the exhibition. Again, she has a rather masculine appearance, but interestingly, the items given to her were not all masculine. So in fact, quite a few items in these collections were perfume bottles from Paris, was a golden sari, were cards with dried flowers. So I guess the idea of the masculine may have been dominant in the physical education curriculum, but it was not maybe dominant in all other parts of education. That was the impression I got. So, and this is also why actually the arts play such a major role, or played such a major role in the institution, and certain values which would have been considered feminine at the time.
I just interrupt for a moment, not on behalf of Julia, but on behalf of Tantro. See, the word means to weave, and it has been in vogue since 6th century BC, got more importance during Buddhist age. Yeah. But the point is, the Gupta age doesn't start then.
No, Buddhism, Tantric
Buddhism. But the point is, the word Tantro has been utilized by many thinkers, including the colonial thinkers, to negative, make it mean negative. So by the time Aurobindo receives sort of a, or Auroville receives a kind of one, it's becoming, blackish in the sense that Tantro means something voodoo, something illogical. But the word starting point and its trajectory, historically, is a very different one.
There are two traditions within Tantro.
Yeah, not only that, there have been differences throughout centuries in Tantro application. So Aurobindo's Tantro and that Tantro as we understand popularly has a very different position.
I'm asking about Aurobindo's idea of Tantro.
Ideology.
Frankly speaking, I don't know what Julia will say. My reading of Aurobindo is that Aurobindo did not have a theory on Tantro.
No,
All he had was a spiritual, the second period. First period of Aurobindo was revolutionary. Second period of Aurobindo was 180-degree turnout. Suddenly it's only spiritual things. But Tantro was not one of the strong points of Aurobindo. Strong point of Aurobindo is that he's talking about spiritual emancipation, so to speak, which got mixed up, etc. Or rather, I would say it was such mishmash that it became a problematic. I don't know what Julia would say. I mean, it's your take, but my take on Aurobindo is that.
Yeah, I guess I would probably support that, unless we interpret this idea of uniting with God through yoga as tantric. I don't know what an expert would say on that.
Yeah, I have this question. Now we see that mothers, Matri Mandir, what we see now in Auroville, from where, what is the base of that shape, and from where that has been, I think that has got some kind of imagination, some kind of base from which it has been imagined. So wanted to know from where this has got wheeled up. That is one thing. Another thing, in this age of inclusivity, now what we are calling in terms of SDG 2030, how much would you rate that ashram? But what is your yes. 2030, yes. In this age of inclusivity, how much would you rate that ashram? Because you're working on that part of that, how women participated in each and every avenues in the ashram. So that's what my question is.
Very interesting question. So her symbol, I think, was the lotus set in a star. So I don't know if that maybe, again, there's no work on that yet, if that maybe would distantly reflect the Star of David, but I think it's a different star shape.
So again, taking
Yeah.
up that's why I spoke about Tantra, because Manda, Mudra, and Maituna, these are the three pillars.
Oh, yes, of
That's
course.
why I wanted
Yeah.
to talk about
Okay, that's very interesting.
Historically speaking,
Yeah.
that was created by the upper classes.
6th century AD.
Yes, that was dividing upper classes in terms of the rituals and everything. So there is a class composition into that. Those who are there, they are mostly the so-called, in modern terms, if we can say working class or proletarians.
The margin and the center.
Yeah, the people at the margins. Any other question?
Yes, there was a second part of the question,
Oh,
namely
second part.
the inclusivity.
Absolutely.
It seems to me that this institution, I hope I'm not doing it, injustice, but was not so inclusive. I mean, it had female and male students, certainly, but as I said already, most were from Bengal, most were Hindu, most were certainly upper caste. So there was the idea of being inclusive, but the question is whom did that idea reach, and who had access? Yeah, yeah. And as I said, there are no pictures of, for instance, disabled children in this bulletin of physical education. So, I mean, certainly inclusivity ended where bodies were not, were not beautiful. And that's rather drastic, isn't it? I mean, at least the pictures don't show such students. Maybe they did exist, but I guess they would have had a hard time at the school.
Hello, Dr. Hauser. Firstly, thank you for this discussion this afternoon. I am more interested to know about your research experience, especially as a female researcher. We have some young people around and budding researchers. So if you would like to speak about your research experience of being in India, also in Germany, as you also mentioned earlier, this year you also got your habilitation work published, and with your doctoral study, the research that you did during your doctoral study. So what has been your research journey, and what would you say to budding researchers? Thank you.
I would tell you to answer this one last, because this is a different one from this.
Yeah.
But I have one question, or rather, let's say, I do not know whether I will call it criticism or a confused one. Was mother, obsessed? Was mother obsessed with male body strength, so that she thought everybody should be like that, and she was actually glorifying so-called male body strength, which is a popular stereotype, because not all male have body strength. I mean, there are differences also. So would you think that mother was actually demystifying this gender stereotype, but at the same time reproducing a gender stereotype through the activities, which is nothing to do with Aurobindo at all? Would you think that that goes on when this drills go on, etc.? She has this kind of idea that, if you know this, then only you are a full person and you can contest with male.
Yes, so indeed students had to contest with her, by the way. On their respective birthdays, she challenged them to a tennis match. So, but yes, she had this idea of the male body being the ultimate aim. And she praised her favorite student, Tara, who was given this whole collection, for actually being stronger than men. So that was the gold standard.
So
yes.
male was the yardstick point.
Yeah.
So the importance is still on the male body and the strength of it.
Yeah.
And that's why they were separated. Who were weak were separated, and they were under training.
That's it.
That's what she said.
This, would you call this a kind of semi-fascist ideas?
Well, I mean, there were certainly fascist influences in the curriculum.
Fascist influences there.
Yeah. I mean,
Because
even though she was Jewish and she was against the Nazi regime, but there were nonetheless was this undercurrent.
Undercurrent, rightist
or
ideas.
eugenicist thought, we could say, maybe.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, thank you. Any other question? Then she'll go to the. Do we have any other query?
I have a sort of query again. The internationalism that is talked about in Aurobindo, isn't that an extension of the Mediterranean concept of cultural development? Because as you mentioned, it was mentioned by Monica about the Algerian, but Algeria was conceived by a lot of French as an extension of France rather than a sub-Saharan country. So just by someone belonging to Algeria, of French speaking, would not necessarily mean that they identify themselves with the sub-Saharan part of the Arabic culture. And absolutely no part of Southeast Asian culture was apparently sort of talked about in the part of the internationalism. I mean, to the limited extent that I know about it, neither Latin America. So the principal concept of internationalism was based on a concept of Mediterranean, that being the center of the world and the culture that came out of it. Is
that a fair criticism?
I'm not sure. I mean, Indian culture, and that in this context meant mainly high caste Hindu culture, did play a role in the curriculum. For instance, with regards to dance, with regards to cultural education. But yes, also French, allegedly French values were held high in the school. And the school also received French instructors from time to time. The journal was edited in both English and French, so I would maybe not say Mediterranean, because then we would expect also to find an influence from Arab cultures and so on in the curriculum, which was not there at all. But I would say French cultural influences did play a major role, yes.
Okay, now you should answer Chalmi's question in terms of research experience.
Yeah, so I started actively researching in 2007 with my PhD thesis, which, by the way, also brings our interests together because it was on the history of childhood. Yeah, what can I say? I mean, of course, it's not always easy for female researchers. So, for instance, you do encounter people in academia who think you're not intellectually up to them, and that is separate from not knowing enough on a topic. That's always legitimate criticism, I think, because that gets research further. But you do sometimes encounter the attitude of not being taken seriously. So what I would say to younger colleagues is just persist. And just think of the people who support you, who are hopefully there, take their advice, and be strong.
I extend Julia's one line. All through life, women researchers should be very strong. It's not younger colleagues. Even at the old age, you should be very strong of what you believe, and you should pursue whatever you want to pursue. There will be lots of obstacles, but that's part of life.
Yeah, there's also true for
Yeah, that applies actually to male also. Yeah, that's what I said. Applies a lot of males. Lot of males.
that is why the French call it c'est la vie.
C'est la vie, yes.
No, I'm not present in the most part of the lecture actually. But I was just thinking about, I don't know, maybe you have explained it. This title which you have given, Mother's Politics of Physical Education at the Sri Aurobindo Ashram. Why would you think you mentioned the term politics over here?
Well, that was more in a wider sense, as you know, I'm a cultural historian, and we use this term in a wider sense to explain that the body has an important function, that it has.
Why not? That's philosophy.
Well, I mean, the nation played a central role in this school, and so did international relations, and that's more the sphere of politics, I would say. I mean, politics not in sense of party politics, but more.
No, that I understand.
Yeah.
That's not. But anyway, the term politics over here, over philosophy, because I think there is some sort of philosophical influence of the whole system, because if
Yes.
you look at based on this, whatever Aurobindo's writing, what we used to
Is philosophical.
actually, it's basically always trying to put up this philosophy of education, physical education and something. But you mentioned it as a politics of physical education.
Yeah, so I guess one could also say, one could also dwell on the philosophical aspect. Yes.
That's what I thought actually, because if you look at all the different books which you can actually are available in the Pondicherry Ashram regarding this, main books are actually regarding the philosophy of mothers. There are a large number of books in that, as well as there are many pamphlets also you used to receive over there. And see in Kolkata, in Aurobindo Ashram, you know, there are certain things are being always there. Every day they are having some sort of activities over there.
Yeah.
But when, say for example, when I am actually at my younger age, actually, very, say between 10 to 15, at that time, in the part where I am living, that's in Southern Avenue, over there, Ravindra Sarovar Stadium was there. And over there, there is 2 rooms are actually given for this Aurobindo and Mother's philosophy. And there actually, they actually help us to go for this type of physical exercises and many other things. Along with there are some sort of chanting of certain how you can pronounce these things actually. Mata. This is the one they give us to practice for that. And I at that time, I don't know, we practice that, but I don't know what actually they mean by the term matam. Matam.
Well,
This
something
word
with
there is-
mother and
Yeah, but matam is the one what they used to. So mother. So why she has been actually looked as mother?
well, that is a concept that Sri Aurobindo came up with.
Yeah,
He
but
called
there are
her
certain
that way.
reasons for that. So if you can just let me know about it.
Well, I mean, throughout the 19th century, when women entered social work, at least in Europe, they often used this concept of spiritual motherhood. Because in the 19th century,
Oh, it's
women...
a continuation of that.
Yeah, I guess so,
spiritual
yes.
motherhood to mother. Okay, so when Aurobindo is converted into that, spirituality is one of the major turning point. After that, this terminology being used.
Before that, there is no writing Aurobindo, so far I know, that he used it. Because Aurobindo, Sister Nivedita used to edit Aurobindo's newspaper.
Yeah.
there's
So that
nothing
time
like
to nationalist, freedom fighter and other things are
That
there.
was different Aurobindo altogether. So there was no mothering sort of, mother figure sort of, nothing there. But in Pondicherry, everything is there.
Yeah, in Pondicherry is actually over there, it's
I mean,
predominant.
he did reflect on female goddesses quite a bit before, right?
Goddesses, but
I-
not this way. Not the way as like, icon or idolatrous position. But as, in terms of, see, goddess in India are always seen in terms of energy. And that's a criticism against India, that once goddess, some goddesses are in terms of energy and all women are in terms of being enslaved. This is the contradiction which have been discussed. There is a huge debate and discourse on that. But Aurobindo did not do that in his early years. But later on, suddenly Aurobindo came up with this Ma concept. I guess this comes with, his influence of others, and also he thinks that, it gives him some kind of, Om means there is a mo in it. Om.
Yeah, that Om.
So that's has a connection with it.
Ah, interesting.
That's the connection with it that actually Pranab Bhattacharya, I forgot now, probably Pranab Bhattacharya mentioned that his knowledge of what he understood as Sanskrit, he sort of transformed into some kind of a theoretical position in terms of philosophy, motherhood philosophy, where father is completely absent, but present underneath that you have to be strong like a father. So this is sort of a complex one, but Aurobindo also was very complex at that state of mind. Quite unsettled at some point and then got settled, sort of. I would presume that, but I think Pranab, I'm forgetting, Pranab Bhattacharya has this mention.
Okay. And my last question is actually, because at only the last part I could hear what you were mentioning, regarding the practicing this physical education and vanishing the sex differences. So this one you wanted to mention about that equality? Or anything else?
Yes, there is certainly this idea of equality that is present in the whole agenda, or rather the idea of, annihilating differences and pointing out the common aspects in all humans. That is a very strong aspect, but it is sort of counteracted by this ideal of the male body being stronger. But there is this aspect of equality, but there is also
So
this
with
other
respect
aspect.
to
and-
that stronger strength, and in that respect, physical education is will help these particular differences to vanish.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
That's it.
with respect to that, it has been mentioned.
Women would be like men.
No, that means when you say that, that means you are giving male some sort of
Yeah,
plus.
that is exactly, I don't know what
Yeah,
they would say, but
yeah,
I
yeah.
understood mother's position exactly that.
Yeah, it is
The
like that.
volumes of my mother's.
No, but if you just read Aurobindo's writing on a mother, never he mentioned about it.
Not Aurobindo.
Never he mentioned about.
Aurobindo was much more complex.
Yeah, it's absolutely a different term. He explained mothers.
But mother is clear on that. Her ideal was a strong person who is a male, but in case females can also do that.
And they can even
Yeah,
be better,
and
but
it's
that's the
sort of
standard.
like,
Yeah.
This is my idol, the female, the male. So I strive there. That's exactly the whole unequal position that I have to be like a male. So that's the interesting part of it.
So there actually lies this particular concept that mother, when actually Aurobindo, when actually mentioned about this particular Shakti, mother is
Yeah.
Shakti,
Yeah.
and Shakti is something what she actually he received from that particular
Yeah, that's
person.
right.
And so when that is actually in that particular the auditorium where the meditation is going on, they actually kept that higher level where mother's thing is over there. And normally they sit where Aurobindo used to sit over there, that's lower than that. So always he looked at that mother is Shakti, and that's why is going to be above.
Indian tradition. Mothers are
So,
centers of Shakti,
yeah.
energy, everything. So Durga is Durga, Kali.
Whatever
Durga,
with the,
whatever.
goddess, yeah.
But then the reality comes. Then the reality comes in everyday life that women are not really equal. This is the contradiction a lot of people have shown. Lots of people have shown that when considered reality, the real crude reality, there women are unequal. Very unequal, even legally.
But mentioning about this, that by physical exercises and physical education training, the women will be more strengthened like men.
That is fine, but just we can say women will be more capable, empowered, and inspire other to become strong person. Because if I know I can.
Sports ladies over here still are not being considered as they are much stronger than any one of the
Right.
of the male,
Yes.
but they are still not being considered as a
I mean,
ladies.
the point is that if any man anywhere trying to have a fight with Dara Singh, that man will be equal to woman.
Yeah, that is wrong.
This part has to be understood.
Whenever somebody is less, that is
This part has to be understood.
Yeah, so that should not, we should not actually think that should be right.
No,
So there
not
are
at all.
many
Mother has been
people-
criticized for this. Mother has been criticized for this, as far as my small knowledge go on or will.
Yeah.
If we don't have any other one, so we can finish. We had a very sort of livening talk and a discussion, and we thank Dr. Julia Hauser for coming all the way.
And I would like to thank for all comments.
I thank our Vice Chancellor for giving us a little bit of time from his busy schedule, and I thank profusely my Women Development Cell members whom actually have had classes, examinations, everything, but they came and they did help. Without them, it would not happen. And I must mention one person who actually did everything because I was sick for last 3 days, Dr. Chandni Basu. We should give her a special thanks that she did all the work. No doubt.
Gargi also helped, because
Gargi
Gargi and
also,
Chandni
yes,
has gone
I
there.
know. But Gargi is another department. Gargi is in classes most of the time. And Gargi and Mullika, Polumi, and everybody in the women.
So Julia, your idea of this vegetarianism in your particular entangled history of vegetarian, is that something you got here after visiting Aurobindo?
Acha, we have a parting song. We had started with an introductory song by John Lennon, Imagine. So we have a parting song which is by Rabindranath. Vishwa Shati Joge Jethay Viha. Our friends from finance, performing arts are helping us a lot. The Imagine was really good.
Who sang?
I'll send you the YouTube link because the one you get it.
Because day before yesterday.
That was my choice, but she did it. I thought it's a very proper occasion. এটাও আমি চুজ করেছি না গৌতম বাবুর পরামর্শে গৌতম বাবুর সঙ্গে কথা বলবো নিশ্চয়ই কিন্তু ওর সাথে না কথা বলে কি করে হবে আমি তো স্পেশালিস্ট না আমি জানি আপনি ধারে কাছে দেখেন সব ইস্ট
গলাটা দিন
অরুণদা তো গলা দিতে পারে ইচ্ছে করলে দেবে না
এই গানটা খুব ভালো গায় বিশ্ব সাথে
অরুণদা আর ছাড়া হবে না গলা দিতে হবে লাজু মহিলাদের মতো ব্যবহার করবে এত কিছু শোনার পরে
সেইখানে যোগ তোমার সাথে আমারও সবার পানি যেথায় বাহু বসারো সেইখানেতে প্রেম জাগিবে আমারও সবার পানি যেথায় বাহু বসারো সেইখানেতে প্রেম জাগিবে আমারও গোপনে প্রেম রায় না ঘরে আলোর মতো ছড়িয়ে পড়ে গোপনে প্রেম রায় না ঘরে আলোর মতো
also. আচ্ছা একটা কথা বলে দিই, আমাদের বিসি প্রফেসর ডক্টর ধ্রুবজ্যোতি চট্টোপাধ্যায় also 6. So Orunda sings, Professor Ashok Ranjan Thakur sings, and Professor ಧ್ರುವಜ್ಯೋತಿ Chottopadhyay.
I will definitely see one
এটা ধ্রুব তাহলে আমার আমি ধ্রুবর পেছনে একটা ছবার ছবি আচ্ছা লাস্ট একটা সবাই মিলে ছবি তুলতে হবে, কারণ জিও ট্যাগ করে পাঠাতে হবে IQAC কে। Sir, we are